Shiren the Wanderer, the mystery dungeon of Serpentcoil Island, is the latest entry in the Shiren the Wanderer franchise, keeping its core gameplay but making updates to bring it into the modern era of gaming. A copy of the game was kindly provided for review purposes. After receiving a vision of a mysterious girl held captive by a terrible monster, Shiren and Copper make their way to Serpentcoil Island, which is a distant island rumoured to be the lost stronghold of treasure-hoarding pirates. The story is a simple one, but there are inclusions of side quests that add more depth to the gameplay and its characters. At its core, Shiren the Wanderer is a mystery dungeon style game. You will go on runs through procedurally generated dungeons, with you starting at the start should you see a game over screen. Each run you begin at level 1 with nothing in your inventory. Later in the game there are also ways to hold items in your warehouse, but for the first few runs it may be a little bit annoying as you learn and understand these systems. Enemies and NPCs in the dungeons move whenever Shiren does, making exploring each randomly generated floor of the dungeons a strategic endeavour. You can spend each turn moving one space, using an item or attacking. When you do a turn, so does your enemies, so they all move at the same time. It is simple and easy to understand, but there's a lot of complexity within the variety of items you may pick up, weapons that you can use, and enemies you'll encounter throughout each run. If you do get a game over in the middle of a run, you can call on other players for a rescue to get help. If you are rescued, you can pick up right where you left off without losing any progress. You can also help other players and rescue them yourself. You do have to wait for a rescue though, so it is potentially, if you want to keep playing, the best option just to restart. However, if you were planning on taking a break anyway, you can put out a call for a rescue, and hopefully by the time you pick up the game again, you can start off where you left. As you progress through each dungeon, you will pick up many items, some of which need to be identified either through magic or scrolls. You won't know these items' effects until doing so. This means equipment you pick up might be cursed and might be a bad thing for you and detrimental, making an already difficult dungeon run even harder. You just wouldn't know it. Early into the game, you also get access to the Master Dojo, where you can practice against enemies before you set out again on your next run. This is helpful in learning the ins and outs of enemies and traps in a setting that has no consequences. As the game slowly opens up, you gain access to optional side quests, marked on the map by exclamation points. These often nab you beneficial rewards like weapons. You can also recruit different companions in the game. Having companions aid your dungeon run can completely change the feel of the game. They abide by the same rules as Shiren does, but can make a huge difference, especially when facing multiple enemies. Not to mention, if you and your companion team up to take down an enemy, you will lose less stamina and in turn not have to eat onigiri as frequently to replenish it. That brings me to the stamina bar, which, like health, is important to maintain. Once it reaches 0, it is game over. It drains progressively while moving through dungeons, but is easily enough managed with onigiri. A quick tip is you can get onigiri from the old man in the first town before you set out on a run, so be sure to do so. The other thing to note is the first dungeon is essentially a long tutorial before you get to the main dungeon and side quests, with post-game dungeons all having different rules and increased difficulty. I think this works well as new players will take longer to complete the initial dungeon, whilst experienced players may breeze through only to find plenty of challenge in the post-game. Shiren the Wanderer's soundtrack is delightful. It is heavily influenced by the East and works perfectly within the setting. The franchise has always had great soundtracks, and this entry is no different. Shiren the Wanderer, the mystery dungeon of Serpentcoil Island, is a fully 3D title in the series that I think many gamers at first glance would not think it is impressive. However, there are so many little details in the graphics that you may overlook at first, such as the crashing of waves in the very first level. Now, I'm not saying this is the best looking game out there, but I do like the style they chose for this entry. The cutscenes are all well done from a visual standpoint, and the towns in particular look fantastic. The main gripe I have is with the little map you uncover as you go through each dungeon level. It looks very outdated compared to the rest of the graphics. I do like, however, how they put this little map that uncovers to the side of the screen rather than covering up where your character is walking. The menus are also perhaps a little lacking visually, but I will give them credit for being easy to use and showing all essential information at a glance. Shiren the Wanderer, the mystery dungeon of Serpentcoil Island, is the most refined entry to date in the franchise. Whether you have played the Shiren games before or are a newcomer to the series, you can definitely find enjoyment in this game. Whilst it stays faithful to its original formula, these types of games have definitely grown in popularity over recent years, which makes this game a great way for Shiren to be introduced to a new audience. I can recommend this game to anybody that likes dungeon crawlers or roguelikes. It is challenging but never feels like you cannot progress forward. For example, I'm relatively new to the Shiren franchise, having only briefly played the previous entry, and yet I was still able to make steady progress throughout the first dungeon. By my 5th run, I was easily getting past the 10th floor in what is a 31 floor dungeon. For those of you with plenty of experience, the game does open up post that first dungeon, so there is a plethora of content that you can keep going back to. It also has a high replayability due to the fact that the dungeons are procedurally generated, so each time you have a run it will be different. The steady progression feels rewarding, and I never once felt like this game got too hard or too difficult and wanted to stop playing because of that, which shows just how wonderfully designed Shiren the Wanderer is. Thank you so much for watching this review. If you did find it helpful, make sure you leave a like, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!